I lived less than a mile from the office, and I really almost never left because what was at home for me was unhappy. And it had just reached sort of peak unmanageability. And like with a lot of women, it takes until we get sick
Yep.
to make a change.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond Empty Nest. I'm your host, Jody Silverman, speaker, mentor, and Chief Dare Officer at Moms Who Dare. Every Thursday, I'll share stories of midlife transformation, happiness tips, and dare you to see the opportunities waiting for you so that you can make this next chapter even better than the last. If you're ready to dare, I'm ready to dare with you. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to Beyond Empty Nest. Today, I'm joined by a truly inspiring guest who has redefined what it means to reinvent your life after 40. She's here to share her personal story of transformation, how she completely reimagined her personal and professional life at 50. We'll uncover the lies we often tell ourselves to keep the status quo and what magic happens when we start telling the truth. We'll also dive into the surprising shifts that come with dropping estrogen. Hello, freedom and self-determination. This episode is packed with wisdom, empowerment, and practical insights to inspire your own reinvention. So let's just dive in, because Erin Keating makes hot stuff for women over 40. She is the founder of Hotter Than Ever, a media company that empowers and lights up the lives of women over 40, and host of the Hotter Than Ever podcast. Her company's mission is to create programming that liberates women to break the unconscious rules they've been following to become freer, happier, sexier, and more self-expressed in the second half of their lives. Erin, welcome to Beyond Empty Nest.
Thank you so much, Jody. I am so happy to be here.
I am too. And fun fact, Erin hosted me as well on her podcast. So you're going to get a lot of Jody and Erin and Jody. So
It's a mutual admiration society, my favorite kind of society.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, we always start with a story, and I know that you have a really powerful personal story of your personal professional reinvention. So,
Hmm.
share with our listeners, because a big part of why we do the show is to dare women to believe, to really believe that, life begins in midlife. It doesn't end, and that anything's possible. So I love when our guests share the stories. So yeah, go for it.
Thank you. I mean, I'm such a believer in that. I am happier, healthier, hotter, more engaged, more lit up than I ever have been in my life. And I've lived a really interesting life and had a fabulous career. But I did a lot of good girl stuff my whole life. I was like a prep school rebel, right?
Ah.
I was always like running everything and getting good grades, but also like fancied myself a little bit of a wild child, but only within very sanctioned sort of spaces,
I
right?
got that. I get that.
Um, and so I can start in a hospital room at UCLA during the second wave of COVID in 20. I mean, those years, who knows what the numbers
I
are
know,
that
right?
attach to those years, but it was probably 2021, summer of 2021. I was vaccinated, but I had come down with COVID pneumonia. I had been sick for about a month, and it was not getting better because I was working my way through it. I think a lot of people who have big careers and big quote unquote important jobs, a lot of women and the culture of the workplace is such that we take Dayquil and we take NyQuil and we think we're going to get through it. And if we're working remotely, it's even easier to hide, the box of tissues. And I got very, very sick with the Omicron variant, which is every time I say these words, I'm like, oh God, echoes of trauma past, like
Right.
our cultural nightmare of COVID. I got so sick that I had to check myself into the hospital, and when I got there, they said, "Oh my God, right this way. And how are you so young and you have COVID? And what is happening? And you're vaccinated?" And the fact was that I had relied so much on work as the place that was giving me the good stuff in my life because my marriage was weak, and unhappy because I had twins and parenting them was so hard. And it was the one place in my life where I was feeling like I was getting all the cash and prizes. I was getting, all the pats on the back. I was getting all the big assignments. I was crushing it and I was making tons of money for the first time in my life. But I was hiding. I was
Oh,
hiding
yeah.
in my career. I was hiding at work. I was working for a big tech platform, making original shows for your phone for an audience of 13 to 24-year-olds. I was winning awards. I was doing all the things. But I would stay at work until 7 or 8 o'clock on a Friday night.
Yeah. That's,
And all my colleagues would be going home and they're like, "Oh, you got a lot to do." And I was like, "Yep." I lived less than a mile from the office and I really almost never left, because what was at home for me was unhappy. And it had just reached sort of peak unmanageability. And like with a lot of women, it takes until we get sick
yep.
to make a change.
Yeah.
I hear this story over and over again to the women that I talk to on my podcast that we think we can do everything, that we are managing the professional load, the breadwinning, the parenting, the domestic labor. Don't get me started on domestic labor. I will
Yeah.
lose my mind. Um, a- and it takes until our bodies go, "Nope, no, thank you." Uh, and mine, I couldn't recover without checking into, I often want to call it a hotel room, but it was a hospital room. And
Yeah.
it might as well have been Canyon Ranch.
Right.
Canyon Ranch is like a big bougie spot in
Oh,
the
I
middle
know a
of
Canyon. I've
nowhere.
been there a couple times.
Oh, I mean, I've never been, but I have a fantasy about it clearly. And I just took a breath for the first time in probably, between 5 and 10 years. I really, I found myself alone with my own thoughts. I found myself in the care of other people who were there to, make me well. I, no one could call me or text me justifiably. Nobody could need anything from me. And for the first time in years, I was able to have quiet.
Mm.
It took me having COVID pneumonia,
Yeah.
um, to get to that moment. And I spent 2 days in the hospital. I got a lot of flowers from people. The biggest bouquet was from my work. And I don't think you need any more of a metaphor than that.
No.
That was where I was putting my attention, and that was what was giving me the juice in my life. Um, Except that they don't love you,
No.
right? Your employers don't love you. It's a relationship where you use each other to get what you mutually need. And hopefully you care about the people you work with and you find the
And
work fulfilling and
respect and care.
satisfying. Absolutely. Work is amazing. I have always been overly identified with work.
Yeah.
Um, but it was interesting to see such a visual representation of that. And then, my now ex-husband, um, I had twins at the time. They were 8 or 9. And he had to care for them all the whole time, like several days while I was in the hospital, and he couldn't handle it. And he was melting down. And he was supposed to come pick me up from the hospital, and he picked a fight with me over
Mm.
text. And I just remember sitting at the end of the hospital bed with my blanket that I had brought from home and my little bag and feeling so small and vulnerable. And I just thought, I could cry thinking about it now. I
Yeah.
just thought to myself, this isn't how this is supposed to be.
Mm.
This is the in sickness and in health part of my life.
Yeah.
This is the crucible moment. And he can't show up for me. And he
Mm.
was so angry at me because he was so scared that if I died, he would be responsible for the kids and that he couldn't do it. He never was able to articulate that, but that is how it occurred for me. And in that moment, I thought, mm, I think something has to change. And I turned 50 2 weeks later.
You had what my very dear friend Jill Scherer Murray would call an epiphany,
Absolutely. An
right?
absolute epiphany. One of many that were to come.
Yes.
But it was the first one where I was like, oh my God, you get one life. Mine could have ended. What am I doing? What am I doing?
Wake up
What
epiphany.
am
Yeah.
I doing in my life? Is this the life I want? This is it. And so, um, in the next 6 months and then in the next year, everything changed in my life. My husband and I decided to go to couples therapy for the last time. We were fighting viciously. And we both agreed like things weren't working and that we would try one more time. It was probably the sixth time. We were married for 17 years.
Okay.
Um, and, you know, I knew it wasn't going to work, but I thought for the kids, for whatever, like, let's try it one more time. And then he started to say, when we would argue, I'm just going to move out. And I started to say, when?
Yeah. Oh,
When's that going to happen? And then he did, and it was a miracle. It was a miracle. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And 2 days after he moved out, my son said to me, my son who was super identified with his dad, I have twins, we're very close. He said, I feel bad about saying this, but it feels better.
see that, Erin, we're going to stop for a second because you are doing something so selfless right now, sharing this story. This is a hard story. It's a vulnerable story. And you said something because I have sat down with some divorce experts on this
Mm-hmm.
show, really
Mm-hmm.
high level divorce experts. And one in particular, her company is Divorce and Children,
Mm.
which actually should be a great guest on your show.
Mm.
Um, and we talk about and I'm a child of a divorce, and I
Yeah,
think many
me
parents
too.
try and they 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 try because of the children. And it's not that it's wrong. We try. Nobody wants to have a quote failed marriage. My mom said it feels like a failure, even when it's the most courageous decision any couple person can make. In my
If
opinion,
it's
it's
right, it's
courageous.
right,
And your kid, but that was so powerful what you said. Like even your son, he felt the difference because they feel it. They feel that friction. They feel the silence. They feel the energy. We feel
Oh,
energy.
they heard the fighting. I
They
mean,
heard the
we
fighting.
were not a silent conflict couple. We were a loud conflict couple.
So yeah, so there, it's I love your go ahead. I know I stopped.
Yeah.
So your son
So
said
he
he
moved
feels the
out.
difference.
He moved out. And 6 months later, I got laid off.
Hmm. I think the universe was conspiring for you in your favor, but
A
okay.
100%. A
Uh-huh.
100%. 6 months later, I got laid off. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? I'm 50 years old. I have a complete blank slate of a life. I have some severance. I have some savings. I had wanted to go to Italy for my 50th birthday. That was my dream, but it was COVID. So I went on a retreat in Italy after I got laid off for 2 weeks with a woman named Sherry Salata, who, if your listeners don't know who she is, she's wonderful. And she was Oprah's executive producer for a long time. She helped run Oprah's network, and now she has her own sort of self-help business, sort of like a tough Midwesterner turned guru. And we stayed in this magical place in Umbria. And she said something to me, which I hear almost every day of my life. She only said it once, but I swear she's like, has it on repeat. And she said to me, how much time do you think you have left?
Mm.
And I thought, shit. Like, I've never thought about my mortality. I never thought, I'm not a morbid person.
Yeah.
I've never think about really not great at thinking about the future apparently either when you hear where I'm at today. But I um I just was like, yeah, this is it. You get one life. You get one life. And I had been licensing my voice to corporations for 20 years. I had started out as a writer performer. I had started out wanting to be an actor. I wasn't booking auditions in my 20s. I was doing it in New York. I found myself making all the things I was involved with. I would be like, I'll rent the theater. I'll hire the person who knows how to make a lobster costume because I'm a comedy person.
Right.
um, I'll deal with the budget. I'll do the PR. Like I realized, I was not an actor as much as I was a producer. But there was still a part of me that wanted to be self-expressed and that wanted to say the truth. And I had been working for these corporations for 2 decades. I was a direct deposit girl. That was all I knew how to be. It is still a real struggle for me to not be that person. Um, and I just thought, I know how to make TV shows. That's what I did for a living, right? Like I could develop and produce a TV
Right.
show. I knew how to do that. Um, I was a huge fan of podcasts, and I thought, well, I'll just make a podcast. I'll just make a podcast. Like, because I needed to speak my truth, and I knew that there were women out there like me who needed to hear the conversations that I would want to have,
Mhm.
and I wanted to get back to myself. I wanted to get back to who I am. I wanted to get back to feeling free and self-expressed. I wanted to get back to telling the truth about what I really thought.
Yep.
You can't really do that in corporate life, especially if you're a leader on your
No,
team. Like,
no.
you really cannot speak truth to power. And you cannot say what's so a lot of the time. And what I was living was a life where I could not say what's so in the marriage, in my professional life. Yeah, I just couldn't. There was a lot of lying that I was doing to keep everything going. And it felt worth it to me until it didn't.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that you shared that because it's not only it's lying to ourselves, it's not even just lying. It's lying by omission. It's just keeping
100%.
quiet because you can't. And I really have to tell you, the podcast world has kind of liberated that for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are a million different podcasts,
Yep.
and each one has its own voice. Yours has your voice, mine has my voice, and we get to speak our truth.
Yeah.
And those that resonate with it follow us, and those that don't can go away, but you're not going to get fired from it.
Right. Right. And I was really frustrated by having my agency kind of controlled by
Yeah.
someone else.
Yeah.
I thought that I had made the safe choice by working inside these companies, by getting that direct deposit, by getting those stocks, by getting the
Yeah.
401k and doing all the things. And I'm so grateful for that. I wish I could still be that person. I really, really do. But it
Oh,
broke for me. It
okay.
broke. And I also started to question this sort of keeping up with the Joneses life that I was living. I had dreamed of buying a house. Only ever lived in the most expensive places in the world, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, like
Yes.
lived in Los Angeles. I finally vested all the stocks that I had been accruing over the years at the company, and they had a couple good years, and I cashed in and I bought a house. And I built a pool and I did all the things and I drove a fancy car and I had the watch and the jewelry and the this and the that. And I felt like, okay, like I belong in the world. I'm a sophisticated adult, self made woman. I have a partner who has a career also. Like we are really doing it. But it was a shell. The outside of it looked really great, really fucking impressive.
Yeah.
And
As do many people. And
100%.
if there's,
And
yeah, you can't judge it. You don't know what's going on in somebody's life, right? And
no, you
you don't know
really
what's
don't.
happening behind the Mercedes, behind the 3,400 square foot home. You don't know behind the fancy dresses and the parties. You don't know what's happening in their life. And not
No,
that you should know, just stop the assumption of it. you know?
Right, right. Well, we have some cultural disease,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
we are very superficially oriented capitalist
absolutely.
society.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so what we are told to want, often if you are a good girl and you are achievement oriented, you want to get married and have kids and buy the home and have the this and do the things. And it's like you're on an escalator. You get on in your 20s and you go, okay, we're on for the ride. We're doing all the things. We're achieving these, checking the boxes, going up the levels. And then at a certain point, you get to the top of the escalator. And for us, as the most successful generation of women who have ever lived on planet Earth, the most agency, the most financially empowered, the most emotionally evolved, the most, working on ourselves, doing all the yoga,
Yep.
doing all the therapy, doing all the things. We arrive at the top of the escalator at around age 50. And maybe we had kids and maybe we didn't. And maybe our kids are about to leave. And we look around and there's nothing. It is an empty field. I think of it
Yes.
as like a Talking Heads song.
Yeah.
Like, where it's like letting the days go by, like, and then you end up and you're just in a like, there's tumbleweeds
Yeah.
and the horizon as far as you can see. And for me, that was the moment that I got to where I was like, I have all the things. I've gotten to the top of the escalator. And now what?
Now what? I knew you were going there. I was like, say it. Say now what? It's
Now
always
what?
now.
Because
Yeah.
that's where so many of our peers
We
are.
land there. We land
Now
there. That's where the women
what?
land. And then now what phase of life, whether it's their children leaving, whether it's, I love that metaphor, the top of the escalator. Okay, now what? How
Now
do I
what?
get down there gracefully, or how do I just continue, keep going? Yeah.
Well, there's no more escalator.
I love
You've
that.
done the things.
Yeah.
And because technology has disrupted so many of our businesses, so many of the ways we live and work, there's no predictable next step for any of us. So I had a conversation with a girlfriend who's had a very similar career as I have in television. And she said, I did everything right.
Yeah.
I did everything right. And I climbed the ladder and I thought that at this point I would be the leader. I would be the decision maker, that I would make the money, that I would have the status, that I would be able to decide what, in our business of television, like what culture is, like that's, I always wanted the cultural influence. Like, let's make a thing that, is subversive and talks about, you know, things in an alternative, interesting, quirky way. Like that's my point of view. Let's joke about the important things. Like
Right.
that's what I want to do. Um, and she's right. Like there is nothing that we were raised to expect or that our baby boomer parents who had a very different life and a very
Yes.
different trajectory they were raised to expect or what their lives came to be. I thought my life would
Well,
look like my mom's life.
they were raised for the practicality of it. You get a good job to make a good living to support your family. We had that plus the things that we were supposed to get. And it goes to the whole being happy for no reason,
Yeah.
which Marcy Shimoff, the author of the book of the same title, defines as that inner sense of peace and well-being, regardless, in spite of your
Right.
to your outside circumstances, because it's the things don't make us happy. We can feel accomplished. We can have a moment of joy. I love a gold star just as much as you do, Erin.
Oh
I
my
love the gold
God.
star.
Yeah.
Give me the trophy. I have trophies behind me all the way at the top. You can't see them.
Mm-hmm.
Give me the trophy all day long. And yet that's not though going to determine my happiness now. And I think that's what we come to realize, and what you realized in that moment, your friend is realizing there's more to it than that. And I do
Well,
believe,
and that there's no safety net and
no,
there's no guarantees and there may
no,
not even be social security.
no,
Like,
right. True.
like,
True. That's,
so
yeah, yeah.
what I choose to see instead of just having an abject panic attack every day of my life is the opportunity that is for reinvention, for self-determination, and for community with other women around not having to do it the way we thought we had to do it all along. So
Our
at
terms.
this point in our lives, all bets are off. All rules are exist to be broken. All lies exist to be, dismantled and truths be told because who gives a shit?
Right. No.
Like, people say, "Oh, well, I reached my 50s and I had no fucks left to give," right? You've heard people say that. It's
Oh, I
very,
know. There's a favorite, my favorite Instagram reel. I see it all the time.
yeah. My point of view on that is I actually have all the fucks to give. I'm just going to put them where I want to put them because I was putting them in all the places I was told to put them. And now I'm going to put my energy, focus, attention, care, love, passion. I'm going to point them at the things that I want to focus on. And I want to make those things grow. So for me, I was in a marriage that had no sex for 10 years. So one of the first things I did when I came out of my marriage was get to it.
Got jiggy with it. You got
Went on
jiggy
the
with
dating apps, took the pretty pictures, like
it?
went out and like sought my own pleasure. And um, you know, there's a lot of willing participants in that if that's what you're
Yes.
looking
I
for.
would, I
Um,
don't know firsthand, but I could
mhm.
just assume that you had no trouble, finding a willing participant in there.
Yes, or many. Yes.
So,
I have definitely been having the time of my life in that way. I have never dated more than one person at the same time. I was a monogamist. I now I'm like I have lovers. That's the way I think that seems glamorous to me. I like to say it like that.
I
It
like
makes me
that.
feel European and sophisticated um and they are not the be all and end all of my life and they are not the men I want to spend all of my time with, but they're different, different kinds of care, different kinds of dynamics and relationships. And they're real relationships. It's just on a different basis and a different set of terms. And I'm doing it how I want to do it.
Love that.
And I'm investigating that all the time. Like, is this good? Do I like this? How do I feel in this? How
Right
can
there,
I
right there,
use
right
how
there.
do I feel?
How do I feel? That
Yeah.
is my go-to. How will I feel if? How does this make me feel? How will I feel when?
Yeah.
Tapping into the emotions, how it's going to make you feel is the most effective way to make a decision that's in total alignment with what you want.
Well, it's everything. It's everything. And I realize that like in a patriarchal work culture, which is corporate America, we are not encouraged to make decisions intuitively. We are not encouraged to dig into our gut. We are not, um, it's not a female way of engaging. And
And
I'm not
that's our
saying,
strength. That's our superpower.
and that's why companies with women on the board do better
Yeah.
and women in leadership do better, like especially women who've gone through menopause and are no longer subject to the hormonal cycles and ups and downs that dominate our lives until that moment. When your estrogen drops,
There you go.
so does your desire to accommodate others.
I love that.
And I learned this from Eva Clay, who is a sex therapist who I had on my podcast. She said that to me, and it unlocked so many things for me. Because when you're younger, especially if you're raising children, you do need to accommodate others in order to be a member of the tribe, in order to have be part of a community and have your childcare needs met and get everything done in the way that cares for your offspring
Yeah.
and cares for you while you are doing that. And then when you're in the phase of life where my kids are in eighth grade, I have 4.5 more years with
Yeah.
them.
Yep.
So they are, as you have said, once they get a car, once they start to drive, they're headed out the door.
Yep.
And, and then hopefully if you've done it right, like they launch and, maybe they come back for a couple of years or whatever in their 20s. But, hopefully my kids understand that the expectation is they will go to college and they will be independent and they will invent their lives as they see fit. I don't have rules for them.
Yeah.
I just have high standards for them.
I get
And
that.
I don't have to nag them in order to get them to meet those standards,
So
and And so, you are, if you don't have to accommodate others, I don't think a lot of us are used to thinking about a life that is not oriented around accommodating others, which is
No, we're
why this
not.
period of life can be very uncomfortable.
Yeah. No, I love that you said that. I love that you said that. And because I'm going to say it again, because we focus so much on with the negative when estrogen drops, the negative in post menopause. And there are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of physical
Sure.
challenges. And yet nobody has ever said it on my show, what you just said, that when your estrogen drops, so does your desire to accommodate others. And I want that to land right there. I just want to pause for a minute because that is so on point with what this midlife chapter is about. It goes back, it wraps this whole episode up and
Yep.
with one big bow that when you can, unfortunately, whether it's if you can come to the epiphany that you get to put yourself first
Hmm.
in your life and you start to ask yourself, how do I want to feel? What is it? What lights me up inside? What's going to keep my fire going? And give yourself permission before you crash. And sometimes we have to crash and burn. I mean, we so many women have. I mean, you ended up in the hospital.
Yeah.
Thank God you're okay. And your
Thank you.
marriage, marriages end and children struggle and there's always going to be challenges. But I love that you said that, embracing this part of life. Midlife, it is empowering. It comes with challenges. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
and what you write on your website, and break the rules and find your fire.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like that
because I
sums
don't
this
think
up to
we've
me.
given ourselves, especially if we're moms, I think it's really hard to give yourself permission to put
Yes.
yourself first, to put the oxygen mask on you, I
Yeah.
mean, since my separation, one thing in my life before I was 50, which is kind of the pivot moment for me, I was never alone in a
Mhm.
place where no one knew where I was and what I was doing. I was accountable to everyone 24 hours a day, and it made me feel, in retrospect, at the time, it was just my life. But in retrospect, it made me feel claustrophobic, trapped, hemmed in, oppressed. And I remember at a certain point, I was going on a date after all of this happened, and I was driving on the highway, and I thought to myself, no one knows where I am. No one knows what I'm doing. I'm so excited about that fact.
Such a good feeling.
I am on my own reconnaissance. I am making my own decisions based on my own desires. Like, I just felt like, oh my God. I was back to feeling like I felt in my late 20s.
I love that. I love that. That is so important because I've felt that way before in my life where I want to just go out and I don't have to tell anybody where I'm going today. Like I'm
Leave me
just out.
alone.
I know.
Like, let me
I
do
know.
what I want.
So okay, so we have to kind of wrap this all up together.
Yeah.
So before we get to our dare, how would you like to bring this all together? What is the overarching message that you want to leave for the listeners right now? Because you've shared so much about yourself, and your story is so powerful and impactful and has offered listeners so much to consider and think about. So,
Hmm.
how would you like to bring it home for them
Yeah.
and lead it into a dare for us?
So, what I want to tell women is that they don't have to do things the way they've always done things. And they don't have to do things the way they've been told is the only way or the right way to do things. We are at the top of the escalator. The landscape is open. If you want to build a tiny house community with your girlfriends and all go there and never speak to men again and have a communal kitchen and live that way, fucking great. If you want to move to Mexico, move to Mexico. If you want to be polyamorous and have a husband and a boyfriend at the same time and everyone communicates about it, fantastic. If you want to become a chef because you always liked cooking, you can go to cooking school. Like, if you want to cash in your 401k that you saved so carefully and buy a round the world plane ticket and spend the next 2 years traveling to every of the world's seven wonders, You can do that. Like, I think we live such rule bound lives that are conscribed, prescribed, circumscribed, some kind of scribed
Yeah,
by,
we need ChatGPT for that. Go
I know,
ahead.
we live these lives that we need to lie in order to maintain.
Okay.
We need to pretend that things are okay that are not actually okay with us.
So stop pretending.
So, what I would dare the people listening to this podcast to do is to look at the small places in your life where you are overriding your own actual thoughts, your own actual feelings. If you pretend every day that you love your mother in law, but you actually think she is a terrible person, at least tell yourself the truth about that.
I like that. I like that. That's a great dare. Look at the small places in your life. This is your dare, everybody. Look at the small places in your life where you are overriding your own thoughts and feelings and get honest with yourself. Start with yourself. If you can admit it to yourself and and then you can start expanding and experimenting outward. A
You
great
don't
dare.
have to tell anyone. You
No,
don't have to write it down. But
yourself.
we are so good at overriding what we are actually thinking and feeling. And the more we can get honest with what our body is telling us, with what our heart is telling us, with what our spirit is telling us, then I think we can sort of start to shed all the weight we carry and feel a little bit more free, a little bit more joyful, and like there's a little bit more positivity, optimism and possibility for your life over 40 or 50.
Love it. Love it. Erin, thank you. Oh my gosh. What an impactful conversation. This was amazing. Amazing. And to all our thank you for being here. Thank you.
It's
And
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
for all of our listeners, I mean, wow. Wow. Like, I want to ask my standard questions. What was your takeaway? What were your takeaways? Like, what wasn't your takeaway is really the question here. So let us know. Let me know. Let Erin know. I have everything you need to connect with Erin in the show notes below. You know how to contact me. You can even just click the link at the very top of our show notes and leave us a review and tell us what you like. A quick text. I can't reply to those. And I don't know who you are, but if you just want to say something, share the love of this episode. And also, don't forget that if you really enjoyed this, there's more on Erin's show, Hotter Than Ever. I said that right, right? Yeah.
You sure did.
Oh my
Hmm.
God. Oh no, that was a menopause moment. Anyway, so let us know what you liked. Follow, download, share this with all the women in your world. And remember, next week, there'll be another episode of Beyond Empty Nest. And as I always say, dare on. Love this episode of Beyond Empty Nest? Head to jodiesilverman.com for full show notes and more fun resources. Hey, are you feeling stuck? Like every day is just Groundhog Day? It's time to shake things up with my 30 doable dares. These simple, fun challenges will get you moving, boost your mood, and spark that sense of accomplishment that you've been craving. Doing something new can transform your mindset and build your confidence. Are you ready to dare yourself? Click the link in the show notes and start today. Let me know which dares you took action on so I can celebrate with you. Dare on.